Political parties are gearing up for registration weekend and the local government elections. One South Africa movement chief activist, Maimane, was in Mfuleni earlier to introduce a group of independent candidates that his movement will work with. This is part of its model to bring power closer to communities. Let's find out more from Maimane. Thank you so much for making time, Mmusi. So the candidates that you introduced today, which areas will they be contesting?
Well, good afternoon and good afternoon to fellow South Africans. We've unveiled 45 candidates who come from different communities in Sebokeng, Val, the greater Mfuleni community. We really are serious about wanting to even remove this sort of district model because it perpetuates another center where people can loot more resources. And so really they represent a diverse community of people, and we're confident that in partnership with the New Horizon movement, we'll be able to bring change to Mfuleni.
This cohort of independent candidates, my understanding is they'll be campaigning for elections under the banner of the New Horizon movement. Is there a reason why they're campaigning under that banner?
Well, one of the things that I promised South African citizens is that I wanted power back to the people. So initially we identified a number of independent candidates. Then subsequent to that, in partnership with associations like the New Horizon movement, we felt it was important that they work together in a local cluster. That way you ensure that you not only get the direct vote for the ward candidate, but you also get the proportional representative vote in a local municipality. And we're replicating this model in communities like Greater Letaba all across the country. And so more specifically today in Mfuleni, New Horizon movement have been the movement that has been championing change there. And we helped and worked with them not only to train their candidates to ensure that they know how we worked at executing an election, but we can also give the governance framework so that when they arrive in council under Bishop Vincent, they're able to give the appropriate leadership and governance infrastructure. So it's important that power is restored back to local communities so that there isn't always this feeling that someone from elsewhere can come and tell us about it. I mean, Clement, I come from Dobsonville in Soweto. My knowledge of Mfuleni cannot ever be better than the people of Mfuleni. Therefore, power must always be with the people in their local community.
How different is this movement from your normal traditional political parties?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. One is it doesn't need to contest anywhere else other than the fact that it works with independents. It's non-political in the sense that its recruitment of candidates are not people who come from political infrastructure. These can be citizens who come from business, who come from civic society, who come from faith-based communities. They've been able to bring them together. And then thirdly, and more importantly, is that the power is always, in terms of nomination and removal, is always with the citizens. Because you will remember, if you nominate a candidate who stands in Ward X, it's often in political party systems, only the party is able to remove them. But in this instance, we're saying we want to give power back to the community. So if the community is unhappy with candidate X, they can, through the same way that they did nomination, be able to remove the person so that always, if someone isn't working, they can work with it. It's to avoid state capture, it's to avoid corruption, it's to ensure that ultimately the leadership is given from communities.
Okay, just two questions on that, Mmusi. One, how are they going to do that? So if they're not happy with Clement, who's their local councillor, who do they then approach so that Clement can step down? How do they go about raising the issue of accountability and getting Clement off as a councillor? The second question, so that's about accountability. And the second question is around other metros that you are going to be contesting as well. What are you looking at?
Yeah. So on the first, what's important is that we have a broader association which we ask all candidates to be a part of. And my job as One South Africa is to engage community members so that they know they nominated Clement in ward, whatever. And if they're unhappy with Clement, they can write the same formulation to say, there are so many people who have voted to say Clement is not doing what we asked them to do. And when that happens, when you lose the confidence of the community, we write a letter to the New Horizon movement, who are then naturally automated to make sure that they inform the speaker to begin a by-election and that candidate is removed. The power always sits with the people. And in terms of the broader South African infrastructure, we're looking at Mfuleni, we're looking at the city of Cape Town, we're looking at a number of communities. And if we had more time, in other places, for example, in Tshwane, we've only got independent candidates. We've got communities in Greater Letaba. We've got in the Northwest, we've got a number of communities that we're contesting in. We've got contestations in the Eastern Cape. In Nelson Mandela Bay, in Gqeberha, is a conversation that we're having. We've set up an infrastructure there. We'll be working there. So ultimately, we wanted to make sure that, A, we didn't overstretch ourselves, because it's important that you get the best caliber of person. But B, we wanted to make sure that we are able to be represented across the country. And that's why this weekend is the most significant weekend in this election. Young people must turn out to register to vote, because if they don't do that, they can't vote. And this election is about not only the future of young people, but their present-day reality as far as finding jobs is concerned.
Yeah, so the power that the community has, are you not worried about the unintended consequences here? I mean, we know that a lot of communities, especially those that haven't been getting the services that they deserve, they want instant change. And sometimes when you've given them that unfettered power, if Clement has been a councillor for about a month and that library hasn't been built and the water issues haven't been fixed, and some of these issues take a little longer to fix, then they would then institute a process where Clement then gets off as councillor, even when there are things happening in the background, but they're not just seeing the results. Are you not worried about that and the instability that would create?
Look, democracy faces the same risk, whether it was a big party or not a big party. I think that half of the reason we see often councillors' houses getting burned stems out of the fact that there's an impatience. But we've had 25 years, or at least over that, of local government by the ANC. I think that what we're asking citizens to realize is that to fix that mess not only takes a long time, but it requires a different model. So on the first instance, we've got to beg for that patience that comes with citizens. But the second one is, you want candidates who are actually in constant dialogue with people. The reason we're not importing candidates from elsewhere and putting them into the community as a political parties normally do is that those people are then engaged with citizens. They can have regular conversations with them, so that their partnership between business, civic society isn't one that happens prior to elections, but is continued post that. But I think ultimately, it would be the most important thing that we must all remember, is that democracy relies on the power of the people. So you can't then say, well, we'll take it away from them because people tend to be impatient. You've got to be willing to go, knowing that risk, knowing the power communities must have. That's why we must go the risk that we can, because ultimately, if we don't, we end up with state capture and what party politics have done, and that's the natural consequence.
All right. Mmusi Maimane, thank you so much for making time. That's the One South Africa Movement Chief Activist, Mmusi Maimane.